Hello Pro Strikers. I asked the question if you'd like a video on stab kicks and you answered with a resounding yes. In this video we'll be looking at arguably the most effective kick in combat sports today. By the end of this video you'll know the why and the how behind stab kicks and the varying methods it can be thrown. We will also take a closer look at the tactical applications and how the stab kick can be implemented into a fight strategy. So let's take a deep dive into the stab kick.
They don't get to look at monitors.
The front kick, called a Geri in Japanese, is certainly the main kick in traditional karate. This is the most used kick in traditional kata forms and the most practiced kick in traditional Kihon practice. The kick is a very strong and fast strike and easier to master than less natural kicking techniques. It doesn't require as much flexibility, coordination or dexterity as say a roundhouse kick or a spin kick. There's no pivot and there's no rotation. The kick connects with the ball of the foot under the toes, but other points of impact are sometimes used in the many variants existing in Japanese karate and other styles. It can be thrusting, a kekomi, or snapping, a kagi, or somewhere in between. We are seeing other variations of stab kicks, particularly in Japanese kickboxing, with the likes of Takeru and Yuki Yosa incorporating stabbing style roundhouse kicks into their game. As talked about in previous pro striking videos centered around J-kick fighters, many kickboxers in Japan come from Kyokushin karate backgrounds. These styles have a wider variety of kicking techniques than you'd usually see in Muay Thai or Dutch style kickboxing. Technique overview. The stabbing front kick is characterised by its trajectory, focusing on delivering force through the ball of the foot. When we look at the mechanics of a Thai style T, we see the fighter lifts the knee high and extends the hip out, pushing as opposed to stabbing. The knee is elevated first and the kick extension can come as much as a few seconds later. The snap kick is thrown almost from the floor to the point of contact, with the leg spending much less time in the air. It's delivered in a much sharper manner. It's desirable to retract the leg immediately after delivering the kick to avoid the opponent trying to grapple the leg, unless of course you're in a combination process. The fighter wants to return to a stable fighting stance as quick as possible. The stabbing style roundhouse kick is thrown in a similar fashion as a traditional Muay Thai style roundhouse kick, except for the fact the kick isn't turned over all the way. It is aimed at attacking the flank of an opponent, but targeted using the foot rather than the shin. It is thrown with a straighter leg and at more of an upward trajectory than a traditional roundhouse kick. It's like a halfway between a straight front kick and a roundhouse kick. Here is an example of pro striking patron and up-and-coming UK Muay Thai talent Tyler Hogan stopping his opponent with the round kick style stab to the body. How to throw a stabbing front kick. I would say the number one fear for any man or woman about to throw a stab kick is the fear of crushing every toe in the process and hobbling oneself from there on in. Think of the scene from Misery where Kathy Bates takes a mallet to James Caan's ankles, but only this time it would be his toes. This is a very legitimate fear, my pro strikers, but with good technique and more importantly good timing, one can avoid such catastrophic events. By the way, just take a look at any Thai boxer's toes, myself included, and there's going to be at least one that's completely crooked. Start in a proper fighting stance. Having a wider stance is helpful when delivering a kick with the rear leg, and a narrower stance when delivering it with the front leg. When delivering a kick with the rear leg, you can distribute your weight slightly into the front foot, making the back leg lighter and easier to get it off the floor. Raise your kicking knee sharply towards your chest, as this helps to generate power and maintain balance. Now this is really important, your toes should be pointing up, preparing for the strike, curling them back to keep them in a strong position and braced for impact. The idea is to target the ball of the foot so you're curling your toes back and almost out of the way. Think about coming up onto your tiptoes while standing on the ball of your foot. As you extend your leg, focus on thrusting the ball of your foot directly forward. Unlike a traditional front kick where the foot may come through more slowly, the stabbing front kick is a quick thrust, almost like a snapping jab. You're essentially flinging your foot at your opponent, but with some control. Picking a target is obviously very important. Precision is key. Aim for the opponent's chin, solar plex, liver or lower abdomen, depending on the distance and positioning. You also have to select the opening that you can see. This might be gauged upon your opponent's reactions to previous feints. The key is to drive forward with the foot using your hips to add power and maintain momentum. You're driving directly through the target. Think of a cobra striking its prey. After impact, quickly retract your leg. If you're kicking with your rear leg, You want to bring it back behind you so you're in your correct fighting stance. If you're kicking with your lead leg, then you can land forward. You want to get back to your fighting stance as quickly as possible, unless of course you're going to advance into further combinations. Purpose and applications. The stabbing front kick serves several purposes and can be used as part of an overarching strategy in a fight. The first one we're going to go over is distance management. By stab kicking the opponent, you can keep them at bay, making it more difficult for them to close the gap. This can cause hesitation in the opponent, which can be capitalised on with effective fakes. Here we see Sean O'Malley stab at Sterling with a front kick from range. O'Malley uses the rear leg as Sterling is in southpaw stance, meaning the right leg is attacking the open side of his stance. The great thing about this technique is it can be used from a wide stance, meaning O'Malley is ready to punch if Sterling were to step in. He's keeping himself in position and ready to go. O'Malley is stood with his weight slightly forward, making his right leg light and easy to get up quickly. From this look, he is baiting Sterling to come in, but he is not taking the bait. The stab kick is a great way for Sean to force the issue, potentially hurt Sterling, whilst remaining relatively safe at distance. In this example, we see Conor McGregor use the same tactic as O'Malley, only this time the roles reversed, with McGregor being in southpaw and using his left stab kick. McGregor kicks from distance and catches Mendes with the left hand as he blitzes to close the gap. Picking at your opponent from range is going to make them want to force the issue and potentially make mistakes. In this instance, McGregor uses the stab kick to maintain the range he's already at and correct himself after landing a roundhouse kick. Pairing straight kicks and lateral kicks is a brilliant tactic, as it becomes very difficult for the opponent to know which is coming if the techniques are thrown from a similar starting point. This is something we'll cover more later in the video. McGregor had worn Mendes down with pressure, which led to the finish, and a big component of this strategy was the McGregor snap kicks. Using a stab kick when your opponent's back is to the wall or the ropes in a ring is always going to be a great strategy, as they can't go backwards to evade it. Disruption. The sudden nature of a stab kick can catch opponents off guard, interrupting their attack or plans. It can take a fighter out of their headspace and be a great distraction whilst you plan your next offensive move. Leon Edwards used the stab kick as a big part of his strategy in his run to the title. As a man that likes to take his time and pick his openings, the stab kick is a weapon that helps him to score points, make his opponents hesitant to step in, and take them out of their game. Leon's technique is pretty much flawless, and he's a fast and explosive athlete, which obviously helps when throwing a stab kick. The stab kick can be used much like a boxer's jab, only it has the benefit of being able to be thrown from further away. Setting up combinations. The kick can be used to create openings for further strikes, such as punches or other kicks. It can be a great way to bridge the gap and close the distance on an opponent. When thrown with the lead leg, it enables the fighter to remain in stance upon landing, meaning they can fall directly into power punches. Here we see Sukiru lift his lead leg to stab front kicks into the midsection of his opponent. The advantage of doing this with the lead leg is Sukiru remains in his stance when he falls forward. He can use the stab kick to bring himself into range and follow up with a combination of punches. This is a favourite tactic of the Japanese buzzsaw. Go check out the Pro Striking Breakdown on Takeru to learn more about his style. Cerrone vs Miller. This fight was another great example of how effective the rear leg stab kick can be in an orthodox vs southpaw matchup. The fight was relatively competitive on the feet with a lot of 50-50 punch exchanges, but it was the kicking game of Cerrone which proved the deciding factor. Once he'd found a home for the weapon, he used it again and again and again, until eventually landing a high kick to seal the deal. The stab kick was forcing Jim Miller to bring his rear elbow across the body to protect himself, which opened him up to the high kick. As talked about previously, the initial movement of the foot, hip and shoulder when throwing a power side strike can make all those strikes look the same. The opponent can't tell if it's a punch, kick or knee coming. When you only have a split second to choose the correct defence, it can be a costly error to make a mistake. Semi Schilt was a master of the Mae-Geri. Known as the Hightower, his formidable height and weight played a factor in his ability to end the fight with a single stab kick, but this said, his technique was top draw when throwing the technique. Volkov is another Goliath. He uses his height to his advantage by implementing the stab kick in his game. His kick to the body against Walt Harris was a straight out of the textbook example, and once again shows how effective the kick can be in an opposite stance style matchup. It's also highlighting how taller people definitely have the advantage when it comes to the stab kick. When we look at a fighter's reach in the stats, we're talking about arm reach, but leg reach is another key point. Damage. Attrition warfare is a military strategy consisting of belligerent attempts to win a war by wearing down the enemy to the point of collapse through continuous losses in personal, material and morale. Yeah, that's a Wikipedia explanation. Attritional damage is the aim of the game for any pressure fighter in combat sport. It's about the accumulation of strikes, and the stab kick definitely falls into this category. It wears down an opponent's will and resolve. Tips for effectiveness. The number one tip for effectiveness is practicing timing. The success of the stabbing front kick often relies on the element of surprise. Practicing against pads or a partner can improve your timing and accuracy, and obviously integrating it with other techniques. Using the kick in combination with feints and other strikes to confuse your opponent is going to help set it up and create those openings. Practice making all rear side attacks look the same is going to be key. Backhands, rear leg knees, rear leg roundhouse kicks and rear leg front kicks can all look identical to begin with. This is what makes hip and shoulder feints so effective. If a fighter can become proficient in blending the techniques, they masquerade and disguise the real intentions. The cross into high kick is a classic example of deception. The stab kick can become an important player in this cycle of attacks. Here we see Israel Adesanya use the stab kick to set up his highlight reel question mark kick knockout. Israel pretty much brought the hip feint into the modern MMA curriculum, and his ability to make his right side techniques all look the same is a detail I'd suggest any pro striker pay attention to. A lot of techniques come from taking a look at your opponent's stance and position before you throw it. Mastering the stabbing front kick can significantly enhance your striking game, providing both offensive and defensive advantages in combat sports. It is generally a low-risk technique to throw, seeing as it's thrown from long range, doesn't have much for a telegraph, and is difficult for the opponent to defend. As it comes up in the frontal plane, it isn't using any hip rotation, the fighter remains more unbalanced than say throwing a roundhouse kick, so it's just a safer and more stable technique to throw. Even if the leg is caught, if the user has a strong hamstring, they can essentially curl their leg back and retract it. The muscles in the leg are going to be stronger than the muscles in the arm. The only drawback to the technique would be for shorter fighters that have a disadvantage in leg reach. Much like a boxer's jab, it can still be utilised by a shorter person. It's just going to take more practice and understanding the distance. As always, thank you for watching the video. You can head over to the Pro Striking Patreon for extra breakdowns and tutorials over there. And make sure to check out the multiple breakdowns on the Pro Striking YouTube channel centered around Japanese kickboxers, as loads of them love a stab kick. If there's any other techniques that you'd like to study, leave it down in the comments below. Pro Striking appreciates you more than watching Anderson Silva front kick Vitor Belfort into the USADA testing pit.
First time I've ever seen anybody knock a guy out with a front kick to the face in MMA, in any contact sport, in karate, in taekwondo, in kickboxing. I've never